Hi everyone, this is Mike Maloney, and in this video I've got my friend Chris Martenson, who has had the latest up-to-date information on the coronavirus. There isn't anybody out there that has been as accurate with their analysis and their presentation on what's happening with the coronavirus, and he's led the World Health Organization and the CDC by more than a month. What the CDC and the WHO have done is just absolutely tragic. But I want to say hello to Chris. So Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, Mike, I'm happy to be here. Wish we weren't talking about pandemics, but here we are, and happy to be here with you and all your listeners today.
Yeah, well, this thing, right now, we're going to talk about the economic consequences of this, because personally, I think it's going to be horrific. And around the world, you're getting like the World Health Organization, the WHO, they have sort of put the health consequences in the back seat compared to the economic consequences. They've actually suppressed the truth, trying to make sure that the world economy doesn't collapse, that the stock markets don't go down, that everything goes along as usual. And, I'm looking at some of the stats and comparing this to like the Spanish flu back in 1918. And I'm just wondering, there could be, when I look at the math, it looks like tens of millions to hundreds of millions could die from this. And I think that the World Health Organization and the CDC will be directly responsible for tens of millions of deaths. And the economic consequences, they're actually going to make them worse, because by not getting a handle on it and controlling it as soon as there were the very first infections identified in the United States, and upping our guard to level 10, by not doing that, they have the spread here is eventually going to go just like it did in China. And what you're going to see, I believe, is countries that are getting a handle on it, like Singapore is right now, and like you've pointed out, you've done all the math on this, but Singapore and South Korea are handling this properly, according to what you've said, and we are not. They're going to close their borders to us. It's the US that's going to be in quarantine, just like China is right now. They're not allowed to travel to the rest of the world. Well, when the US, that does so much business, so much of the business in the world GDP, is represented by the U.S. When U.S. businessmen can't travel to other countries, and people are afraid, and ships stop going to and from the U.S., what happens?
Well, first, we shouldn't look to the World Health Organization for anything except a case study in what bad, corrupt leadership can bring you. I believe there are a lot of good people who work there, but not at the top right now. Second, this is a full-blown pandemic. We have even San Francisco's declared a state of emergency all on its own. Germany just declared a full-blown epidemic is coming, maybe the pandemic. They use the P word, Australia. So this is now getting to that self-evident stage, and we're using the pandemic word openly. So what does that mean? It means that there are a lot of things you have to do to contain this, because this is a three-body problem now. Body one, if you want to stop this, and that's your only goal, you have to do what China did, which is you make everybody stay inside under complete quarantine for a really, really long time. But that raises body two, which is that kills your economy. You got to keep the economy going. People need to be fed. And if that crashes, the outcome could be worse than this. But then you have body three, which is if you have too many people going back to work, all of a sudden the rate of infection climbs to a level that swamps your hospital system. And now this turns from a sort of bad to a really bad disease. The case fatality rate goes from 2% to 18%. That's what we saw in China. So how do you balance those three things? Not easy. But what are the impacts? Well, think of all the things that don't happen while you're trying to balance those things out. Already, tourism, anything sort of discretionary travel, fully discretionary jobs that involve people gathering in large spots. They just closed all the schools down in Japan, I think until April sometime, or maybe the rest of the season. So these are enormous impacts, and the markets have been really slow to get their mind around it. And so have a lot of people. It's just that big, I get it, but people need to be ready for that.
Yeah, and I'm getting ready. We'll do another video shortly about preparation because I think I'm a little bit over prepared, but I'm actually preparing on behalf of my friends and so on that are not preparing yet. So it seems like I'm over prepared, but when I share it with everybody, I think I'm going to have it just right. International trade. What is happening with the ports in China right now? The ports and all the flights that have been canceled because a lot of air shipments of goods and so on has just collapsed. So when it comes to international shipping, how much of the world's manufacturing occurs in China, and how much of the world's shipping goes in and out of China?
Well, manufacturing as of last year was about 28% of total world manufacturing. Let's call it 30%. We'll just round up here because I think it's probably that high in 2019. Those are 2018 figures, actually. So
I got to add one little question here.
Yeah.
How much of that 28% do you think is components that go into finished goods elsewhere?
Well, you're asking the second order question, which is the smart one here. The first order is we lost at least half of that manufacturing, at least. And by region, though, in Wuhan, it's about 100% gone in that whole Hubei region, which is very important to pharmaceuticals, electronics, autos, right? So we don't even know what's happening there because, as you just mentioned, a lot of those factories that are closed down is factory A that makes the subcomponent and precursor for factory B that fashions it into something that factory C needs. And now we're tracking factory C somewhere else in the world and saying, well, it's operating at 50% capacity. But it's going to take so long to unravel this. And they're scrambling. And I talk to people in supply chain and logistics, and they're scrambling as hard as they can. I think simple things like shoes and clothing and where you dye your fabrics, you can move that. Already a huge shock to China because companies are moving their stuff out of China permanently, I believe. But when it comes to something more like, think about Apple. They got that one Foxconn plant. They got many, but they have one that's manufacturing the bulk of their AirPods and also their iPhone components. It has 1,000 factories feeding into that one. All you need is one of those that's supplying a critical component that you can't second source to go out, right, and that whole factory closes down. We don't have a handle on that yet. We just know it's bad. And, I can't tell you more than that right now because nobody understands it yet, except to say we've never faced anything like this.
Right. It's going to be, already, don't we have Hyundai and Kia shut down right now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I believe this is going to affect every car manufacturer that there is. I don't think there's any car manufacturer that doesn't get some critical component made in China. That is something that is a major worry to me. Very few, when it comes to brewing beer and making things like that, that stuff is mostly made here and doesn't rely on a component from China. But as we go along, you're just going to see, we're going to go into this weird, I call it indeflation, where you have some things soaring in price simply because they're becoming scarce. Well, the economy is deflating. You're going to see all of the financial assets, at least the ones that are not safe haven assets. The safe haven assets are going to soar. I think you're going to see the dollar, bonds, and gold and silver go up at the same time. They're all going to be climbing at the same time, and we have seen that recently. This is all stuff that I wrote in my book back in, my first book back in 2005 through 7 is when I was writing that. And what was interesting is I predicted about 10 different things, and I think 7 of them came true in the crisis of 08, but they stopped that crisis before the economy got cleared out, before it got back down to ground zero so it could get rebalanced and build a healthy new recovery. And then they made this fake recovery that just fooled everybody into thinking the economy was doing all right. So they go out and buy more SUVs and big screen TVs and get deeper into debt. So now we've got this weird situation where financial assets are going to be collapsing most likely. And then, I was just doing some of my Finnish prep shopping just yesterday. And I went to Sam's Club, which is like Costco if you don't have a Sam's Club in your area. I was looking at the big screen TVs and I'm going, I'm going to try and have a ranch by the end of this month. I'm getting prepared. Not this month, I'm sorry, the end of next month. About a little over a month to be able to accumulate a property. And it won't have things like a big screen TV and a home theater system. And these things are all going to be gone off of the shelves in 2 months. They're going to run out of inventory. There won't be any replacements. And the price on those will soar because of competition to get them. So all of that, like Apple iPhones you talked about, if they can't get any, the price is going to end up soaring. So what is your prediction on the economic consequences versus inflation, deflation, and so on?
Well, first, I think everybody needs to prepare for the economic shocks that are coming. And I know a lot of people are unprepared when you just look at the statistics, right? 40% of households have $0 in the bank. It's going to be very difficult to maneuver through this period because people might be out of work. Just think about what just happened in Japan where they closed the schools. How many families just absolutely can't cope with that new scheduling thing because mom and dad are both working, they're already on the edge, and now the kids are home? It's going to be a real shock to people. So I think they have to be ready for that. And that means whatever your unnecessary expenses are, skinny them down right now. You know, if you've got that subscription to Golf Magazine, cut it. Not to pick on Golf Magazine, but you get it, the idea, right? Second, everybody needs to be prepared for the idea that just an emergency case, what happens if you get shut down, shut in? Unthinkable in a big modern country, but Milan just got shut in along with the entire province, right? And quarantined. And immediately it went from the abundance of a consumer culture to a lot of scarcity. So people should just get some resilience, a deep pantry, things like that, just to be ready, because the only way you combat something like this is social distancing. You're not going out to concerts, you're not going out to bars, you're not shaking a lot of hands, and you're just little distance on this whole thing. But beyond that, I'm really worried about mostly what happens, and I agree with you, and everything you said has been very predictive, and I think your book from 10, 15 years ago now is going to get totally validated, because what the Fed did was fake. It was illusory. They pumped things up. So now when it starts to fall apart, you know, what do you do with 12%, 1 in 8 companies, or maybe it's 16% now, is a zombie company? They need credit markets. I don't know if you saw this, Mike. I'm sure you did, but Bloomberg 2 days ago put up the scariest chart I've seen, and it showed corporate bond tapping in the bond market, $30-40 billion a month per week, and it went to 0 in the most recent week. We have cratering credit markets. Our whole system that the Fed has been pumping, needs constant credit. If the companies just turned off the lights, they just flicked a switch on that, like, we're out, and that's what happens with credit bubbles. They're fun on the way up, but boy, it's literally like somebody turned the light out. And again, people just need to be ready for that to create shocks in the system. Financial shocks. So financial assets are going to just get savaged here, if only because all of a sudden the liquidity in the system isn't there. And it's a very complicated, complex system that I don't think anybody understands, right? All the Fed knows how to do is throw more money into it and hope for the best. But all of a sudden, when you get that self-interested moment, like we had with the Lehman moment, the banks and the hedge funds and the private equity and all the big money in these dark pools, they all just decide, you know what, I don't trust anybody, I'm going home. And it's a really rapid, sudden process. And I think this is where we discover, if they don't get a handle around this real soon, we discover that derivatives, all 1 quadrillion of them, are the insurance product that worked until you needed it. And then it didn't. And that's the concern here. So that I'm looking for, to answer your question finally, a very, very hyper deflationary environment where some things start shooting up in price. Financial assets down, huge deflation, face masks, 200 euros right now in Spain because they didn't prepare, they didn't see it coming, and all the Chinese people who are living there bought their entire face mask supply out and shipped it home, which, I might have done too if I was in their situation, but the government didn't see it coming. So that's what I'm looking for. A lot of things that are, I would call necessities to get through this, are going to shoot up in price. The Fed will get the inflation it always wanted, but for the wrong reasons. And we're going to see deflation otherwise.
This has been great, Chris, and I want to tell all of our viewers that this is a series of videos. So make sure you watch the next few because they're important. And I want to thank you for what you're doing for humanity with getting people prepared early. You have done a great service to everyone with the last month or so of your videos that you've been doing. And everybody, first of all, subscribe to our channel. Click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, but then go over to Chris's channel. What's the name of your YouTube channel, Chris?
ChrisMartenson.com. Spell it out. Don't use the dot, and you'll get there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. We'll see you on the next video, and this is going to be a continuing video.
All
Thanks
right.
for listening.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Bye.